The alien representative stared at the holographic display with expressions ranging from amusement to outright mockery. The image rotating slowly before them showed a single ship, sleek by human standards but laughably primitive to the gathered members of the Galactic Council. "This is it? This is the mighty vessel Earth sends to request our protection?" Council leader Xanthor's voice carried through the vast chamber. His blue-scaled skin glistened under the chamber lights as he gestured, with four-fingered hands at the projection. One ship. One single ship. Captain Alan Miles stood tall despite the humiliation. His gray eyes remained fixed ahead, his weathered face betraying no emotion as the alien delegates laughed at humanity's sole interstellar warship. Beside him, Lieutenant Susan Wells clenched her jaw so tightly he could hear her teeth grinding. USS Defiant represents the best of Earth's technology, Captain Miles said when the laughter finally died down. "We come to the Council not as conquerors but as neighbors seeking peaceful relations." Xanthor waved a dismissive hand. "Your best technology would have been impressive 5,000 years ago, Captain. Those propulsion systems, outdated. Weapons, barely able to dent a standard freighter's shields, and your defensive capabilities." He paused for dramatic effect. "Well, let's just say most pleasure yachts in Council space have better protection." This prompted another round of laughter from the assembly. 27 different species, all more advanced than humanity, all united in their amusement at Earth's expense. Susan stepped forward. "Council leader, with respect, Earth doesn't need to match the military might of the established powers. We seek only recognition and protection under galactic law, particularly given the recent aggressive movements of the Vordax Empire near our system." At the mention of the Vordax, several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The aggression of the Insectoid Empire was well known throughout the galaxy. A delegate from the Moravian cluster, a being that looked like a floating collection of glowing orbs, moved forward. "The human has a point. The Vordax have been expanding their territory. Perhaps we should consider. The Council cannot extend its protective umbrella to every primitive species that manages to cobble together a ship capable of reaching us," Xanthor interrupted. "Our resources are not infinite." In the observation deck above the Council floor, the rest of the human delegation watched the proceedings with varying degrees of anger and disappointment. Chief Engineer Kevin Barnes, a stocky man with calloused hands and a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, muttered under his breath, "They don't know half of what the Defiant can do. Should show them the shadow drive and—" "Quiet," hissed Dr. Nancy Clark, the ship's lead scientist. Her thin frame and wire-rimmed glasses gave her an unassuming appearance that belied her genius. "Remember the mission parameters. We show nothing unless absolutely necessary." Back on the Council floor, the formal vote was being called. One by one, the representatives of the 27 species cast their votes. The result was nearly unanimous. By a vote of 25-2, Xanthor announced with barely concealed satisfaction, "The petition of Earth for Council protection is denied on grounds of insufficient technological advancement to warrant allocation of Council defensive resources." Captain Miles nodded once, a sharp motion that betrayed his military background. "The United Earth government thanks the Council for its consideration." His words were diplomatic, but his tone was ice. As the human delegation prepared to depart, a junior communications officer burst into the chamber, ignoring the outraged shouts of the Council security personnel. "Captain Miles," the young officer, was breathless, having clearly run all the way from the Defiant. "Urgent transmission from Earth Defense Command." Miles took the offered data pad, his face growing darker as he read. He looked up at Xanthor, who was watching the exchange with mild curiosity. "It seems," Miles said clearly enough for his voice to carry across the chamber, "that while we've been petitioning for your help, a Vordax battle fleet has altered course and is now headed directly for the Sol system. Our home." Murmurs spread throughout the chamber. The Moravian delegate floated forward again. "How large a fleet?" 12 warships, Miles replied. "More than enough to overwhelm Earth's defenses." Xanthor stood taller, his neck frill expanding slightly. An unfortunate development, but the Council has made its decision. Perhaps this will be a valuable lesson for humanity about the dangers of venturing into space before you're ready. Susan Wells stepped forward, her diplomatic training barely containing her anger. So you'll do nothing while millions die? The Council cannot intervene in every local conflict, Xanthor replied smoothly. Though, of course, we extend our sympathies. Captain Miles turned sharply on his heel. We're leaving. Now. The human delegation quickly filed out of the chamber, ignoring the curious stares of the alien representatives. Once they were in the privacy of the corridor leading back to their docking bay, Miles turned to his team. Options? Major Frank Martinez, the ship's tactical officer, spoke first. His muscular frame seemed too large for the diplomatic uniform he wore. We could try to beat them back to Earth, warn the defense platforms to prepare. The Vordax ships will arrive days before we can, even at maximum conventional speed, Susan pointed out. Then we use the shadow drive, Kevin Barnes said simply. A tense silence fell over the group. The shadow drive was Earth's most closely guarded secret, a propulsion system that could move the Defiant at speeds that would shock the Council species. That would reveal our true capabilities, Dr. Clark warned. Everything we've hidden from the Council. Captain Miles considered for only a moment. Earth's survival takes priority over secrecy. We use the drive. As they approached the docking bay where the Defiant waited, Miles pulled Dr. Clark aside. How quickly can you have the Cascade Disruptor online? The scientist blinked in surprise. The weapon system isn't fully tested yet. I can't guarantee. We're out of options, Nancy. The Vordax are bringing 12 warships. Our one ship needs every advantage. She nodded reluctantly. I'll need Kevin's help in engineering. We can have it ready by the time we reach Earth orbit. Within an hour, the Defiant had undocked from the Council station. From the outside, it looked exactly as the Council believed. A somewhat primitive vessel representing humanity's first fumbling steps into interstellar space. The delegates who bothered to watch its departure did so with the same condescending amusement they'd shown in the chamber. What none of them saw was the activity inside the ship's engineering section, where Kevin Barnes and his team were preparing to activate a system that no alien eye had ever witnessed. On the bridge, Captain Miles settled into his command chair. Set course for Earth. Prepare shadow drive for activation once we're clear of the Council monitoring zone. Lieutenant Linda Howard at Communications turned from her station. Captain, I'm receiving transmissions from the Vordax fleet. They're not trying to hide their communications. Let me hear them. Howard tapped her console and a harsh, clicking language filled the bridge. The ship's computer translated. Will be a simple operation. The humans have only planetary defenses. Supreme Admiral Kronax expects full submission within hours of our arrival. Miles exchanged looks with Major Martinez at Tactical. The Vordax clearly had no idea what they were about to face. Shadow drive ready in 3 minutes, Captain, came Barnes's voice over the intercom. Miles leaned forward in his chair. The Council may have laughed at our one ship, but the Vordax won't be laughing for long. Prepare for shadow drive activation. We're going home. The USS Defiant hung in space, now far from the watching eyes of the Galactic Council. The bridge crew worked in tense silence as Captain Miles studied the tactical display showing the Vordax fleet's position relative to Earth. Shadow drive status? Miles asked, his voice steady despite the weight of Earth's fate resting on their shoulders. Kevin Barnes's voice came through the intercom. Ready for activation, Captain. The drive core is stable. Engage. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the stars outside the viewports blurred. A soft humming filled the ship as it slipped partially into subspace. The Defiant lurched forward, accelerating to speeds that would have made the Council representatives choke on their mockery. Susan Wells checked her console. At current velocity, we'll reach Earth in 17 hours. The Vordax fleet won't arrive for 3 days. That should give us enough time to prepare. Miles nodded. Major Martinez, I want a full assessment of the Vordax fleet's capabilities. Frank Martinez, the tactical officer, pulled up detailed scans they had taken while near the Council station. His broad shoulders hunched over his console as he worked. 12 ships total, he reported. Their flagship is a dreadnought class, heavily armed. The other 11 are a mix of cruisers and destroyers. All use standard Council-approved weapons. Technology: heavy energy beams, particle accelerators, standard shield configurations. Standard is good, Miles said. Standard means predictable. And the Cascade Disruptor targets their standard hull weaknesses, Martinez added with a grim smile. If Dr. Clark can get it working. Miles turned to Linda Howard at Communications. Any more Vordax transmissions? Howard, her fingers dancing across her console, nodded. They're still communicating openly. Supreme Admiral Kronax seems confident. He's only committed a small portion of the Vordax fleet to this operation. They're treating it as a minor conquest. Their mistake, Miles said quietly. Hours later, most of the bridge crew had rotated out for rest shifts, but Miles remained in his command chair. Dr. Nancy Clark entered the bridge, looking tired but excited. "Captain, you should see this," she said, handing him a data pad. Miles studied the information. "You've completed the Cascade Disruptor calibration?" "Better than that." Clark adjusted her glasses. "We've managed to increase its effective range by 23%. The disruptor targets the molecular bonds in their hull materials. Their shields might as well be paper. Will it work against all 12 ships?" Clark hesitated. "The system requires significant power. We can target 3, maybe 4 ships before needing to recharge, and we'll need to get relatively close. Close enough for them to hit us," Miles noted. "Yes," Clark admitted. "Our deception has its downsides. Our shields really are weaker than Council standard." Miles nodded slowly. "Then we'll need to make each shot count." The ship's mess hall was half empty during the night shift. Sergeant Olivia Reyes, leader of the Marine Detachment, sat with Dr. Paul Gray, the ship's chief medical officer. Gray looked worried as he pushed his food around his plate. "You think we can really do this?" he asked quietly. "1 ship against 12? Reyes took a bite of her meal before answering. "Throughout human history, battles have been won by the smaller force, the Spartans at Thermopylae, the American Revolution, the Irish Rebellion. Those forces all lost," Gray pointed out. "But they changed the course of history," Reyes countered. "Besides, we have advantages they don't know about." "The shadow drive is just for running," Gray said. "It doesn't help us fight." "No, but the Cascade Disruptor does. And we have another advantage." Reyes tapped her temple. "Humans think differently. The Council species have had standardized technology for thousands of years. They've forgotten how to innovate. In engineering, Kevin Barnes oversaw final checks on the ship's systems. The shadow drive had performed flawlessly, but he knew the real test would come when they engaged the Vordax. A young engineer approached him. "Sir, I've been reviewing the shield configurations. I think I found a way to redirect power from non-essential systems to strengthen our forward shields by almost 40%. Barnes examined the proposal. "This would leave our rear quadrant exposed." "Yes, sir. But if we position ourselves correctly, we could present only our reinforced section to the enemy." Barnes clapped the engineer on the shoulder. "Good thinking. Implement it immediately." On the bridge, Miles received a message from Earth Defense Command. They had already detected the approaching Vordax fleet and were mobilizing their limited resources. Earth's orbital defense platforms, originally designed to defend against asteroids, not alien invasions, were being repurposed as best they could. "They're not going to be enough," Susan Wells said softly, reading the reports over Miles's shoulder. "No," Miles agreed. "But they don't need to be. They just need to keep the Vordax busy until we can strike." Lieutenant Joe Hudson entered the Uri bridge. The ship's robotics specialist looked excited. "Captain, permission to brief you on a potential tactical option." Miles gestured for him to continue. Hudson activated a holographic display showing small devices attached to a ship's hull. "I've modified our maintenance drones. They can attach to the Vordax ships and emit a localized EMP pulse that should temporarily disable their systems. Not for long, maybe 30 seconds, but enough time for us to target with the Cascade Disruptor." Miles studied the display. "How many of these drones do we have?" 12, sir. 1 for each ship if necessary. Get them ready." As the Defiant neared Earth, the mood throughout the ship grew more focused. In the officer's briefing room, Miles gathered his senior staff. "We'll reach Earth in 1 hour," he began. "The Vordax fleet will arrive in approximately 63 hours after that. Here's our plan." He activated a tactical display showing Earth, its moon, and the projected approach vector of the Vordax fleet. "We won't engage them directly. Instead, we'll use the shadow drive to position ourselves behind their formation. Lieutenant Hudson's drones will attach to these 3 ships." He highlighted 3 vessels in the Vordax formation. "Once the drones activate, we'll target those ships with the Cascade Disruptor." "What if they detect us before we can launch the drones?" Martinez asked. "Our scans show their sensor technology follows Council standards. The shadow drive should mask our approach if we maintain distance until the last moment," Miles answered. "Once we've taken out the first 3 ships, we'll assess the situation and adjust our strategy." Dr. Clark cleared her throat. "Captain, there's something else you should know. The shadow drive can't be used constantly. After our arrival at Earth, we'll need at least 12 hours to cool the drive core before we can use it again." A silence fell over the briefing room as the implications sank in. "So once we reveal ourselves," Susan Wells said slowly, "we can't disappear again. We'll have to face whatever survives our first strike." Miles nodded grimly. "That's why our first attack needs to be perfect. We get 1 chance at surprise." He looked around at his officers. "The Vordax and the Council both think we're primitive and weak. They've underestimated us. Let's make sure they never make that mistake again." As the Defiant approached Earth, the blue planet growing larger in the viewports, the crew prepared for battle. Humanity's 1 ship against the mighty Vordax fleet. The odds seemed impossible. But impossible odds were a challenge humans had faced throughout their history, and often overcome. Earth looked peaceful from orbit. Blue oceans, swirling white clouds, and the green and brown of continents gave no hint of the fear gripping the planet's population. The USS Defiant settled into a high orbit, its presence bringing both hope and concern to those below. In the main conference room of Earth Defense Headquarters, Captain Miles addressed the assembled military leaders. Displays showed the approaching Vordax fleet, now less than 2 days away. "The Galactic Council has refused to help us," Miles explained. "We're on our own." General Ruth Wilson, commander of Earth's defense forces, frowned. "Our orbital platforms were designed to track and destroy asteroids, not fight alien warships. They won't last 5 minutes against a dedicated attack." "They don't need to last long," Miles replied. "Just long enough to distract the Vordax while we position for our attack." He explained their plan, showing the capabilities of the shadow drive and Cascade Disruptor. Several of the military leaders looked skeptical. 1 ship against 12? Admiral John Peterson shook his head. "Even with these secret weapons, those are terrible odds." "The Vordax think we're primitive," Miles countered. "Their overconfidence is our advantage." Back aboard the Defiant, the crew worked tirelessly to prepare. In the shuttle bay, Lieutenant Joe Hudson and his team made final adjustments to the drones that would play a crucial role in their plan. Each drone needs to attach precisely to the junction point between the Vordax ship's engine section and main hull, Hudson explained to his technicians. "That's their weakest spot, according to our analysis." The drones looked simple, small metallic discs about the size of dinner plates, but their internal technology was years ahead of what the Council believed humans possessed. In sickbay, Dr. Paul Gray prepared for casualties. He knew the coming battle would test his medical team. As he organized supplies, Sergeant Olivia Reyes entered. "Doctor, my Marines need medical kits for their combat suits," she said. Gray looked up in surprise. "You're expecting boarding actions? Do you really think the Vordax will try to capture the Defiant?" Reyes's face was grim. "No, I think they'll try to destroy us. But if we get a chance to board one of their vessels, we need to be ready." Gray handed her the requested supplies. "Just try to bring everyone back alive, Sergeant." "That's always the plan," she replied with a tight smile. Exactly 36 hours after the Defiant's arrival, Earth's long-range sensors detected the Vordax fleet dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Almost immediately, a transmission was broadcast toward Earth on all frequencies. On the Defiant's bridge, the crew watched as an alien face appeared on the main screen. Supreme Admiral Kronax of the Vordax Empire had mandibles instead of a mouth, compound eyes that gleamed with intelligence, and an exoskeleton that shimmered with metallic implants denoting his rank. People of Earth, the translation of his clicking speech came through clearly. I am Supreme Admiral Kronax of the glorious Vordax Empire. Your planet has been selected for incorporation into our domain. Surrender now, and your population will be permitted to live as productive subjects. Resist, and we will reduce your cities to ash. You have 6 hours to comply. The transmission ended. Captain Miles exchanged looks with Susan Wells. 6 hours, Miles said. That gives us time to get into position. Miles contacted Earth Defense Command. General Wilson, your defense platforms need to respond to their ultimatum. Make it look like you're preparing to fight, but don't reveal your full capabilities. We need the Vordax to focus on Earth, not look for us. Understood, Captain. Good. Hunting. The Defiant moved away from Earth, its shadow drive engaged. To any watching sensors, the ship seemed to simply disappear. Lieutenant Linda Howard monitored Vordax communications as they approached the alien fleet from behind. They're discussing Earth's defenses, Howard reported. They've detected the orbital platforms but seem unimpressed. No mention of the Defiant. They don't appear to know we're here. What about our missing ship, Miles asked. Aren't they wondering where we are? From what I can gather, Howard replied, they think we're still at the Galactic Council begging for help. Miles smiled grimly. Good. Let's keep them thinking that. The Defiant silently approached the rear of the Vordax formation. From this close, the alien ships were intimidating. Sleek, predatory vessels bristling with weapons. The flagship dwarfed the human vessel, nearly 5 times its size. We're in optimal position, Major Frank Martinez announced from Tactical. The 3 target vessels are within range for drone deployment. Miles nodded. Lieutenant Hudson, launch drones. In the shuttle bay, Hudson gave the command. 3 drones shot from the Defiant, their small propulsion systems guiding them toward their targets. On the bridge, everyone watched the tactical display as the drones closed in. First drone attached, Martinez reported. Second drone attached. Third drone attached. All drones in position, awaiting activation signal. Miles took a deep breath. Disengage shadow drive, bring weapons online. The moment those drones activate, I want the Cascade Disruptor ready to fire. The Defiant's shadow drive powered down, making the ship visible to Vordax sensors. For a crucial few seconds, confusion seemed to grip the alien fleet. Their formations remained unchanged as they tried to understand where the human ship had come from. Activate drones now, Miles ordered. Hudson sent the signal. On 3 Vordax vessels, a cruiser and 2 destroyers, the attached drones pulsed with energy. Electromagnetic disruption rippled through the ship's systems, temporarily, disabling their shields and weapons. Targets vulnerable, Martinez called out. Cascade Disruptor locked on. Fire, Miles commanded. The Defiant's main weapon fired. Not a conventional energy beam, but a focused disruption that targeted the molecular bonds of the alien ship's hull materials. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The first Vordax destroyer seemed to shiver, then simply came apart, sections of hull peeling away as if made of paper. The cruiser lasted slightly longer, its reinforced structure fighting the effect for almost 10 seconds before it too collapsed into fragments. The second destroyer suffered the same fate. 3 Vordax warships destroyed in less than a minute. The remaining 9 vessels reacted with surprising speed. Their formation broke as they turned to face this unexpected threat. Hundreds of smaller craft, fighter ships, launched from the larger vessels. They've detected us, Howard reported unnecessarily. Multiple targeting systems locking on. Evasive. Maneuvers, Miles ordered. Activate point defense systems, target any fighter that gets too close. The space around the Defiant erupted with weapon fire as the Vordax ships opened up with everything they had. Most shots missed as the human vessel twisted and turned with an agility that seemed impossible for its size. Those that did hit splashed against the Defiant's shields, which flared blue under the impact. At weapons control, Petty Officer Sam Bennett activated the ship's point defense system, another technology the humans had kept secret. Dozens of Valkyr, small, precise energy pulses shot out from the Defiant, destroying incoming Vordax fighters with remarkable accuracy. Shields holding at 70%, Kevin Barnes reported from engineering. But we can't take sustained fire from their capital ships. Miles knew they couldn't defeat all 9 remaining ships. They needed to force a retreat. Target their flagship, all power to the Cascade Disruptor. The Defiant turned sharply, bringing its main weapon to bear on the massive Vordax command ship. Before they could fire, a blinding beam of energy from one of the Vordax cruisers struck the Defiant's port side. The ship shuddered violently. "Direct hit," Barnes shouted over the intercom. "Engineering section damaged. We have hull breaches. On decks 4 and 5. Seal those sections," Miles ordered. "Status of the Cascade Disruptor?" Nancy Clark's voice came through, tinged with pain. "Still operational, but the targeting system is damaged. We need to get closer for a guaranteed hit." Miles gripped his chair as another blast rocked the ship. "Take us in, full impulse. We get one more shot. Make it count." The Defiant raced toward the Vordax flagship, weaving through a storm of weapons fire. On the bridge, Captain Miles watched as distance rapidly closed between them and the massive alien vessel. "Shields down to 40%, Kevin Barnes reported. From engineering, his voice strained. "We've lost 2 power relays. Medical report 17 wounded." Miles nodded grimly. "Major Martinez? Status of Cascade Disruptor?" "Charging at 83%, Martinez replied. "We need 95 for an effective strike." Another blast rocked the ship. A console exploded in sparks, throwing a crew member to the floor. Susan Wells rushed to help as smoke filled part of the bridge. 35% shields, Barnes called out. "Captain, we can't take much more of this. We need 40 more seconds to reach optimal firing position," Linda Howard reported from navigation. Miles made a quick decision. Divert emergency power to forward shields. Leave just enough for life support and the disruptor. That will leave our rear completely exposed, Barnes warned. "We won't have a rear if we don't take out that flagship," Miles replied. The order was executed. The Defiant's shield energy concentrated forward, creating a glowing blue barrier between them and the Vordax flagship. Shots that would have crippled the human vessel now splashed harmlessly against the reinforced shields. In engineering, Barnes worked frantically amid damaged systems. Steam hissed from ruptured coolant lines. Emergency lights cast red shadows across worried faces. Dr. Nancy Clark arrived, her lab coat stained with blood from helping the wounded. "The targeting system is completely fried," she said. "We'll need to fire manually." Barnes looked up in shock. "Manually? That's never been tested." "It's our only option," Clark insisted. "We need to bypass the automated targeting and use the backup visual system." Barnes nodded and called the bridge. "Captain, Dr. Clark has a plan, but you'll need our best gunner on the manual targeting controls." On the bridge, Miles turned to weapons control. "Sam Bennett, report to the auxiliary fire control room immediately. You'll be targeting the Cascade Disruptor manually." Bennett's eyes widened, but he nodded and ran from the bridge. Miles opened a ship-wide channel. "All hands, brace for close quarters maneuver. We're going straight at their flagship." The Defiant surged forward, now fully committed to its attack run. 3 Vordax destroyers moved to intercept, firing continuously. Several shots penetrated the weakened rear shields, causing more damage. Atmosphere vented from a breach on Deck 6 before emergency force fields activated. In the auxiliary fire control room, Sam Bennett strapped himself into the gunnery chair as Dr. Clark quickly explained the manual targeting system. "The disruptor needs to hit precisely at the junction between their command module and main hull," she said, pointing to a display showing the Vordax flagship's structure. "Do you see it?" Bennett studied the schematic, then looked at the visual feed showing the actual ship growing larger in their view. "I see it. Like shooting a bullseye, just a really big one that's shooting back at us." "Exactly," Clark managed, a tight smile. "You'll only get one shot." Back on the bridge, Miles watched as their bold charge confused the Vordax formation. Several alien ships had to cease firing to avoid hitting their own vessels, as the Defiant weaved between them. "We're almost in position," Howard reported. 500 kilometers to optimal firing range. Supreme Admiral Kronax was no fool. The Vordax flagship began to turn, attempting to present a stronger armored section toward the approaching human vessel. "They're trying to protect their vulnerable areas," Martinez observed. "Bennett," Miles called through the comm. "Target is changing orientation. You'll need to adjust." "I see it, Captain." Bennett's voice was focused, calm. "I'm tracking the junction point. Just get me within range." 300 kilometers, Howard counted down. 200. 100. "Optimal firing range achieved," Martinez announced. Miles didn't hesitate. "Fire." In the auxiliary control room, Bennett pressed the firing control. The cascade disruptor discharged, drawing enormous power from the ship's systems. For a moment, lights dimmed throughout the Defiant. The weapon's effect was not as dramatic as a conventional explosion. Instead, a strange rippling effect spread across the Vordax flagship's hull where the beam struck. At first, it seemed nothing had happened. Then, slowly but with increasing speed, the molecular bonds in the alien vessel's hull began to fail. A massive crack appeared, spreading like ice breaking on a spring lake. The command section of the flagship began to separate from the main hull. "Direct hit," Martinez shouted. The Defiant veered away as secondary explosions erupted across the damaged Vordax flagship. The massive alien vessel wasn't completely destroyed, but it was crippled, its command structure now exposed to space. "They're losing power and atmosphere," Howard reported, monitoring Vordax communications. "Their command crew is evacuating to secondary control areas." Miles allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction before reality reasserted itself. "Status report." "Shields below 20%, Barnes replied. "The cascade disruptor is offline. Power coupling burned out. We can't fire it again without major repairs. And we still have 8 enemy ships to deal with," Susan Wells pointed out. Miles studied the tactical display. The remaining Vordax vessels were regrouping, but their formation showed signs of confusion. The crippling of their flagship had clearly shocked them. "Linda, what are the Vordax saying?" Miles asked. Howard listened intently to her communication. "Feeds. They're confused, sir. Supreme Admiral Kronax is demanding to know what kind of weapon we used. Several ship commanders are requesting permission to withdraw to a safer distance. They're afraid," Miles realized. "They don't understand what we did to them." Martinez nodded. "Fear is a weapon, too." Miles made another quick decision. "Open a channel to the Vordax fleet." When the connection was established, Miles stood tall, despite the smoke and damage around him. "Vordax vessels, this is Captain Alan Miles of the Earth Defense Force vessel Defiant. You have witnessed what one human ship can do. We have more vessels on the way, all armed with the same technology. Withdraw now, or be destroyed." It was a bluff, a desperate one. Earth had no other ships capable of interstellar travel, let alone armed with cascade disruptors. But the Vordax didn't know that. Long seconds passed. Then Howard reported, 2 Vordax destroyers are powering up their FTL drives. They're leaving." Another moment, and a third ship followed. Then a fourth. The remaining ships are forming a defensive perimeter around their damaged flagship, Martinez reported. "They're recovering escape pods from the command section." Miles watched as, one by one, the Vordax vessels retreated to a safer distance. They didn't flee the system entirely, but they clearly weren't continuing their attack for now. "They're reassessing," Wells said quietly. "Trying to figure out what they're dealing with." Miles nodded. "And that gives us time we desperately need." He turned to Barnes on the comm. "Kevin, can you get the shadow drive online?" There was a pause before Barnes responded. "Maybe. Give me 2 hours. But Captain, even if I get it working, we won't be able to use it for long. The damage is too extensive. Just get us enough for one more surprise," Miles replied. "I think it's time we change the rules of this battle completely." 2 hours crawled by as the Defiant drifted on the far side of Earth's moon, hidden from Vordax sensors. The damaged ship hummed with activity as repair teams worked frantically. In engineering, Kevin Barnes hadn't stopped moving since the battle began. "Hand me that plasma cutter," he said to a young engineer. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he worked inside an access panel. The shadow drive coolant system is barely holding together. On the bridge, Captain Miles studied the tactical situation. 4 Vortex ships had fled the system completely. 4 others maintained a defensive position around their crippled flagship. The aliens were clearly rattled but not defeated. Linda Howard monitored communications. "Captain, I'm picking up transmissions between the Vortex fleet and their home territory. They're requesting reinforcements." Miles frowned. "How long until they arrive?" "Based on what we know of their FTL capabilities, at least 3 days." "Then we have 3 days to end this," Miles said firmly. Susan Wells looked concerned. "The Cascade disruptor is burned out. Our shields are barely functional. What more can we do?" Miles turned to her with a determined expression. "We make them. Think Earth isn't worth the cost." The intercom buzzed. "Captain, this is Barnes. The shadow drive is online, but it's held together with hope and duct tape. We'll get 1 jump, maybe 2 minutes of operation before it fails completely." "That might be enough," Miles replied. "Report to the briefing room, all senior officers." In the briefing room, the ship's leadership gathered. Many wore bandages or showed signs of exhaustion. Dr. Paul Gray gave a quick medical update. 23 injured, 6 seriously. Sickbay is at capacity, but everyone's stable. Miles nodded. "Thank you, Doctor. Now here's where we stand." He activated a tactical display showing Earth, the Moon, and the positions of the Vortex vessels. "The Vortex have called for reinforcements. When those ships arrive, we won't be able to stop them. So we've only delayed the inevitable," Major Martinez said grimly. "Not necessarily," Miles countered. "The Vortex invaded because they thought Earth would be an easy conquest. 1 ship with primitive technology, no Galactic Council protection, but we've destroyed 3 of their vessels and crippled their flagship. We've changed their perception. Now we need to convince them that continuing this invasion will cost them too much." "How do we do that?" Dr. Clark asked. "The Cascade disruptor is beyond repair." Miles smiled slightly. "We still have Lieutenant Hudson's drones." All eyes turned to Hudson, who straightened in his chair. "Sir, we only have 9 drones left, and without the Cascade disruptor to follow up. We're not going to use them the same way," Miles explained. "Dr. Clark, could we modify the EMP pulse on those drones to create a more destructive effect? Something that could damage a ship's systems permanently, rather than temporarily disabling them?" Clark thought for a moment. "Possibly. If we overload the pulse generators and add some of our remaining disruptor technology, it would be like planting bombs on their hulls." "Exactly," Miles nodded. 9 drones, 9 bombs. But we need to place them strategically. He zoomed in on the image of the damaged Vordax flagship. "Their command structure is exposed. If we could place a drone here," he pointed to a vulnerable area, "we could potentially destroy their entire command staff." "That would throw their fleet into chaos," Martinez observed, "and place the remaining drones on their other ships," Miles continued. "Target engines, weapon systems, life support." Kevin Barnes looked skeptical. "Captain, even with the shadow drive, getting close enough to plant those drones would be incredibly dangerous. Their sensors will be on high alert now." "I know," Miles acknowledged. "That's why we need a diversion." He turned to General Wilson on the comm screen. "General, how are Earth's orbital defense platforms doing?" Wilson appeared surprised. "They're operational, but as we discussed, they're not powerful enough to pose a serious threat to Vortex warships." "They don't need to be a threat," Miles explained. "They just need to be a distraction." Over the next few hours, the plan took shape. Dr. Clark and Lieutenant Hudson modified the remaining drones, converting them from temporary disruptors to devastating bombs. The shadow drive received final adjustments, with Barnes personally supervising every detail. "Remember," he told his engineering team, "we get 1 jump, make it count." In the shuttle bay, Sergeant Olivia Reyes prepared her Marine squad. "If anything goes wrong with the drone deployment, We may need to board one of their vessels manually, she explained. It would be a one-way trip. Her Marines nodded solemnly. They understood the stakes. When all preparations were complete, Miles addressed the entire crew. What we do today will determine Earth's future. The Vordax believed we were primitive, easy prey. We've shown them otherwise. Now we need to show them that Earth is not worth the cost of conquest. The Defiant moved out from behind the moon, running on minimal power to reduce its sensor signature. At the same moment, Earth's orbital defense platforms powered up and began firing at the Vordax fleet from extreme range. The shots had no hope of penetrating alien shields, but they served their purpose. The Vordax vessels shifted position, turning their attention toward Earth as expected. Supreme Admiral Kronax, now operating from a secondary command center on the damaged flagship, ordered his ships to prepare for another attack on Earth's defenses. Shadow drive ready, Barnes reported from engineering. Drones prepared for launch, Hudson confirmed. Miles took a deep breath. Engage shadow drive. Take us in. The Defiant slipped partially into subspace, becoming nearly invisible to conventional sensors. It raced toward the Vordax fleet at incredible speed. 30 seconds to optimal deployment range, Howard counted down. In engineering, warning lights flashed across Barnes's console. The drive is overheating, coolant pressure dropping. Hold it together just a little longer, Miles urged. 10 seconds. To deployment range, Howard announced. The Defiant's shadow drive sputtered, the ship flickering in and out of visibility as it closed in on the unsuspecting Vordax vessels. 5 seconds, we're in range, Howard called out. Deploy drones now, Miles ordered. 9 deadly drones shot from the Defiant, each targeting a specific vulnerability on the Vordax ships. Almost immediately, the shadow drive failed completely, leaving the human vessel exposed. We've been detected, Martinez shouted as Vordax vessels began to turn. Detonate the drones, Miles commanded. Hudson pressed the activation control. The effect was immediate and devastating. The lead drone, attached to the flagship's exposed command center, exploded first. The secondary command center where Supreme Admiral Kronax had been directing operations simply vanished in a ball of fire. The other drones detonated in sequence, each causing significant damage to its target. Engines failed, weapon systems exploded, and one Vordax vessel lost all power, drifting helplessly. On the Defiant's bridge, Miles watched as confusion spread through the alien fleet. Without their admiral, without clear command, the Vordax ships began firing wildly, some even hitting their own vessels in the chaos. Open a channel to all Vordax ships, Miles ordered. When the connection was established, he spoke clearly and firmly. This is Captain Alan Miles. Your admiral is dead. Your flagship is destroyed. Half your fleet is gone, and this was just one Earthship. We have more preparing to launch. Is conquering our world worth the destruction of your entire fleet? There was a long silence. Then Howard reported, Captain, the Vordax ships are powering up their FTL drives, all of them. One by one, the remaining Vordax vessels disappeared into faster-than-light travel, abandoning their mission. The last to leave was the damaged flagship, limping away under auxiliary power. The bridge crew of the Defiant sat in stunned silence. Then cheers erupted, spreading throughout the ship. They had done the impossible. One ship had saved Earth. Celebrations continued around him. Miles exchanged a quiet look with Susan Wells. They'll be back, you know, she said softly. With more ships. Miles nodded. Yes. But by then, we'll have more ships too. And the Galactic Council will have to reconsider their position on primitive Earth. He smiled slightly. I imagine their next meeting will be quite different. 3 days later, a Galactic Council vessel arrived in Earth orbit. Council leader Xanthor requested permission to board the Defiant. In the ship's conference room, the alien who had once dismissed humanity with such contempt now offered full council membership and protection. Miles listened to the offer, then looked around at his crew, Barnes with his arm in a sling, Clark with her glasses taped together, Hudson and Rhea standing proud despite their injuries. Then he turned back to Xanthor. Earth accepts your offer, Council Leader, but not as a junior member. We expect equal standing and respect. He leaned forward slightly. After all, it only took one human ship to defeat the Vordax. Xanthor's scales shifted color slightly, the alien equivalent of embarrassment. Indeed, Captain. The galaxy has much to learn from humanity, it seems. As the Defiant orbited Earth, Miles stood in the observation lounge looking down at the blue planet they had saved. One ship, deemed primitive and laughable by the galactic community, had changed everything. The galaxy had laughed at humanity's lone vessel, then watched in shock as it wreaked havoc on the battlefield. And this was just the beginning.